Welcome, everyone. Ordinarily, I'd have some global jazz playing for the Fulbright Day event, but I couldn't get the audio working, so it wasn't quite the same vibe. We're going to get started here in a moment. My name is Kyle Mox. I'm the Associate Director for National Scholarships here at Arizona State University and the Designated Fulbright Program Advisor, or FPA, because if you don't have an acronym, you don't work at a university. And obviously our topic of discussion today is going to be the Fulbright U.S. Student Program. So this is specifically for, contest winner, and one of our guests. So today we're going to be talking specifically about the Fulbright U.S. Student Program, and we do have a designated ASU page for all things Fulbright ASU, unsurprisingly, fulbright.asu.edu. So there you can find a lot of the information about our timeline, basic FAQs, things like that, reiterating a lot of the information I'm going to give you today. So I'll try to keep my part to a minimum, which is nuts and bolts stuff, to make more time for the interesting bit, which is hearing about people who've actually done a Fulbright, and give you some good ideas for how to start to approach this process yourself. To put things in context a little bit, I know a lot of people see that word scholarship and they start getting pretty excited. I know I would if I have a 17-year-old looking forward to college, right? But the types of scholarships that we work are a classification called national scholarships, or what I usually call fellowships, meaning that they're open to national or international pools of students. So students from any American university can apply for a Fulbright. None of the awards that our office works with are specifically designated for ASU students. So what that means is you have a very large applicant pool, which means it's very competitive. And because it's very competitive, it's very scarce. And if it's very scarce, its value goes up dramatically, right? We all believe diamonds are scarce, right? And so that's why they're very valuable, even though they're not. So fellowships, on the other hand, are scarce, but the experiences are quite valuable. And because of that, our office exists. Our office exists to help you not only find the right award for you, but also make sure that you're crafting the highest quality application and increase your odds of success. So prestige is a big part of these as well. So what do? We do things like this. We do a lot of outreach efforts. We do a lot of webinars. If you go to our YouTube page, you can see a whole semester's worth of content there that you could watch. If you could binge it on a weekend, I suppose, if you wanted to watch a really boring series. But individual advising, working one-on-one with applicants, we sit down with our applicants and work through the application process. A lot of it comes out as writing instruction, because the one thing in common with all these awards, despite their different deadlines and different criteria, is that they're all going to have a very central writing component. And so the ability to write well and express your ideas well is essential to winning one of these awards. We also assemble campus committees. And so many of these awards, like Fulbright, has a nomination or endorsement requirement, meaning that you have to get the approval or a stamp or a thumbs up from your university, and our office is responsible for organizing that. So, and we even do work with faculty from time to time in helping them craft better letters of recommendation or be better mentors to their students or develop better programming as well. We're a fairly large office, not by ASU standards, but by national standards. Many universities have only one person or a half a person doing, that's a clinical term, like half a person, doing this kind of work at the university. But our administration believes strongly in programs like Fulbright and has been very generous in funding this office. So there's me, of course, you know what I look like. Also joining us is Katie Salgado, is program manager, and she is our primary advisor for the ETA programs. That acronym will mean more in a second. Also our assistant director, one of our aunts mentors, Professor Lori Stoff, who's a Barrett faculty member. Dr. Stoff works with all of the different Fulbright awards, and also joining us, our other faculty mentor is Dr. Bhattacharya, who is here as well, and again, working with all the different grant types, which we'll learn more about in a moment. If you're a graduate student, you'll primarily work with Dr. Habza. He is not here today. I was about to say he's not with us, but that sounded grim. He is in Texas at a conference right now talking about NSF and inclusion efforts with that. But if you're proposing a study research project, you're a graduate student, you will primarily be working with Dr. Habza. You met Kai on the way in. She's the one, if you're going to bribe someone, you should bribe. She has everything to do with our scheduling, event planning, logistics, anything that goes wrong with the process, she can probably fix it for you. As well, the rest of our staff, Shay Masterson, program manager. Over the summer, she will be doing some Fulbright advising, and yes, we work over the summer. We are not faculty. We don't have a 9-month appointment. We have a year-round appointment. In fact, most of our hardest work comes during the summer. So We are here to support you between sessions. And our new faculty mentor who will be rotating on in the fall will be Dr. Irina Levin. She has a lot of great experience with Fulbright as well. We were just kind of chatting about, with our alumni here about our continued success as a top producing institution, or TPI. Again, if it's not an acronym, it doesn't count. Every year, the Department of State announces top producing institutions in the United States. It gets published in the Chronicle of Higher Education. Everyone gets very excited about this. For 18 of the last 20 years, ASU has been on that list. Yes, modest round of applause. About 160 winners in the past decade. And what that does is, in this last cycle, for instance, that rates us 15th overall in the nation among PhD granting institutions or universities. I think the more important thing to note is that second overall for public universities, right? And so obviously, universities that take in only great graduates produce high quality graduates. ASU, we have a larger and more diverse student population, and I think we work harder at it, but it is also our strength. So I'm very proud of those rankings. I'm not one who counts wins or trophies or things like that, oddly enough in this job, but I do. But I'm very proud of that achievement. And even more noteworthy is we get to use this special badge. Only 9 universities in the country get to legally use this digital badge on their websites. That means they were a top producer both for student awards and for faculty awards, because faculty can also apply for Fulbright awards. So I went to the TPI reception in Washington, D.C. last month. I was the belle of the ball. I got to stand next to the list of only 9 universities and take my picture. It was very exciting, totally worth the 5-hour flight. We get between 50 and 80 applications per year for Fulbright. That's a pretty sizable number. I don't think it's that sizable for a university to this size, but it's certainly sizable from our side of things. And averaging 12 to 25 winners per year. That works out on average to an overall selection rate of 28% over the last 20 years, which is significantly higher than the national selection rate, which hovers around 21, 22%. That selection rate's kind of meaningless because it's really happening on a country-by-country basis. Some countries are very selective, as low as 1%. Some are not so much, more like 50%. But on average, it gives you some sense of, yeah, this hard work and this investment does pay off. Our odds of success are generally better than many of our peer institutions. My favorite slide of the whole presentation, and not just for the awesome picture, this is a list of this current year's top producing institutions. Does anyone notice anything suspicious about the institutions listed on this besides ASU? A lot of Ivies. All very selective private. And it almost worked out, I did the math. If you total all the percentages ahead of us, it's 121%. But we're actually at just under 90% admission rate for undergraduates at Arizona State University, as compared to all these universities with single-digit selection rates. So we're performing at that same standard, and a lot of people, I've been interviewed by newspapers, say, well, of course ASU is producing this many. They're huge, you must be flooding the pool. I'm like, no. All of these schools are also putting up over 100 applicants to get similar results. So pound for pound, ASU is outperforming a lot of these other schools. Has a lot to do with, as we were talking, our commitment to global engagement, the investment of the university, our insistence that students get involved in service. It's a very high priority for us. It's a really good fit for us. And so this is the one I send every year to President Crow. He loves this one. So the Fulbright program itself, what is it exactly? First of all, you must all promise me if you email any of us, it's 1L. It's 1L. Just keep that in mind. That's the first red flag if somebody emails and it's full 2 L's, bright, or BIR, never mind. It was created shortly after World War II, coincidentally with the sale of surplus war items and machinery. I don't know who they sold it to or why, but we don't need to talk about that. It's a program of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs in the Department of State, and so this is a federal program, right? This is managed by the Institute for International Affairs, Institute for International Education, but it's done in partnership with the commissions in the host country, and this is one of my favorite things about this program is the final selection is actually made by the host country themselves. So you're not just writing to an American audience, you're actually writing to the people that you're going to be living and working with. And so that's really important to keep in mind as you're writing your applications. You're managed by the embassies on the ground, and so this is really done in collaboration with our partners all around the world. Likewise, there are several thousand Fulbrighters from other countries that come to the US. And so ASU typically has one of the largest foreign Fulbright populations as well. So it's really an exchange program. So commit this to memory. The mission: foster mutual understanding between nations, advance knowledge across communities, and improve lives around the world. So whatever it is you propose to do with the Fulbright, it must be of value to your host community. We'll talk more about what that looks like in a moment. The eligibility criteria are quite simple. You need to be a U.S. citizen, because again, this is a U.S. federal program. Your bachelor's degree needs to be complete by the time you leave to go on your grant. So our next deadline will be this coming fall, which means you need to have your bachelor's degree before you leave sometime the following year. And you can't have conferred your PhD at the time of application. We've had applicants who have defended their PhD, they're just waiting to graduate, and they applied, and they got their PhD, and then left to go on Fulbright. That's fine. So what that means is that we're looking at graduating seniors, so current undergraduate juniors who are looking to graduate sometime next year, people who have graduated recently. We work with tons of alumni, and yes, you continue to work with us, and we love our alumni. They make very strong applicants. And current graduate students, many of whom use Fulbright to fund research that they're doing for their master's work or their PhD dissertation. What do you get? I can't give you a dollar amount. You know, that dollar amount ranges wildly depending on where you go in the world, right? It's obviously far more expensive to live and work in Kyoto than it is North Macedonia, I forgot. Paying for round-trip airfare, living stipend, and housing that's usually paid out enough where you will live what they call a comfortable student lifestyle. Our alumni can talk about more what that means. And again, that's relative to where you are and where you're placed. You could also receive tuition assistance depending on your country and grant type. Some cases you might get additional language training depending on where you're going. And some countries even offer additional funding if you have a dependent. So if you're thinking about getting married or having a child, this might be, the final straw that, cinches that extra $300 a month. Disability accommodations, of course, this is a federal program, so they never want a difference of ability to prevent somebody from going on Fulbright. And then after, the good things just continue on. And so you actually get what's called selective preference for hiring at the federal level. So what that means is you have to get looked at or hired before people in the general pool if you're applying for general jobs. Same benefit that's granted to military veterans. You're part of the Fulbright Alumni Network. You can actually get a lifetime Fulbright email address, which I think is kind of a cool flex. And you're a member of the Fulbright Association. So the hardest thing to conceive at the beginning is what exactly is a Fulbright. And we'll start by just dividing it into two general categories. One of the main categories is what we call study research, and the other one is English teaching assistant, or ETA. Now, within the study research, we have several flavors of what that could look like. The basic flavor is that it's a build-your-own adventure, right? You can propose to do an independent study project or directed study or pursue a research project of your own design. You could enroll in a graduate program at a university. That's typically going to be a one-year master's program at a foreign university. You could pursue the practice of a creative or performing art. Really just about anything goes, right? If it can be done within the calendar year, 9 to 10 months, it's feasible, it provides some benefit, it will advance your career, right? It's entirely up to you. Most of the time that's done in affiliation with a host in that country. So you would have to figure out who is going to host you there, typically a faculty member, but we've had people affiliate with nonprofit organizations or NGOs or research institutes. But yeah, I will warn you, whatever questions you're cooking up in your head right now, the answer is going to be, well, it depends. And you're going to laugh later when you start asking questions and we just start saying, well, it depends. A lot of it just depends on your specific situation. A lot of it depends on what the individual rules for that country are, because each country sets the terms for the awards in their constituency. Now, the ETA awards are a little bit different, and you will be there as an assistant to a lead English teacher in a foreign classroom. So what they want is native English speakers who can provide some context for the language that these students are learning. Age ranges come all the way from elementary school all the way up through English language teachers who are learning to be better teachers. So professional all the way down through little kids. You're there also to design and deliver lessons on U.S. history, culture, things like that. Anything that helps these students who maybe have never met an American before and maybe will never meet another one again, have a better understanding of how English functions in our society. Many countries, the workload is usually in the 20, 25 hour a week range, which means that you have time to pursue supplementary interests, which could be an informal research project or more language training or just audit some classes or something like that. Our alumni can talk more about that. And every ETA does have to have a clear idea for what we call community engagement, because this is an ambassadorial program. You're there representing the United States, and so you are there as the face for the 300 million rest of us, and so you need to leave a positive impression. So what unique talents or gifts or interests do you bring to the table to engage with your host community? Give you some sense of scale, about 2,000 awards per year, give or take. The breakdown is kind of interesting because it used to be ETA is the younger of the two awards. It's only been around for about 25-ish years. That number has grown dramatically because a lot of the funding for Fulbright actually comes from the countries themselves. The US actually only spends 55 cents on every dollar in the Fulbright budget. A lot of that money is coming from the host countries, and they have found the ETA program to be immensely valuable. And so that number has grown. Fewer countries participate, but yeah, about the same, around 1,000. There's also some special awards. I highlight these just because they're kind of outside of the main tracks. Don't feel rejected if like, wow, they don't have my field of study on here. No, these are just some interesting and different awards. There are, of course, the Creative Performing Arts Awards, but there are specific awards in business. There's like a binational business grant where you actually would do an internship in Mexico and a couple other countries. This student actually won a Young Journalist Award to Germany. They actually got placed with a German newspaper as part of her award. There's a couple awards that are specifically for STEM students who want to do research. And then there is a program called Fulbright Fogarty for people that are working in public health. So to give you some idea, we're going to meet some real live alumni later, but to give you some idea of the representatives of different types of awards, MJ was actually one of our student workers. This is hilarious. She was front and center for the whole process. And she applied for Fulbright to go to Timor-Leste, which is one of the newer countries that participates in Fulbright. And so she applied to be an English teaching assistant there and won, and very excited to go because she's an East Asian studies specialist. And so she just kind of wanted to see as many different countries in the region as she could. She got there and she discovered that many of the people in Timor-Leste, because it's sort of bringing itself out of its colonial past, a lot of the people there are very interested in their children learning how to do self-defense, but not a lot of people teaching it are doing it quite right. She's like, well, I'm a black belt, and so she started her own after-school Taekwondo academy in the area where she was living. Good example of community engagement. Julia Jackman, this is an example of a graduate degree award. She ended up pursuing a Master of Science in Global Health at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And she actually used 1 year of Fulbright funding to pay for what ended up being a 3-year degree. And then now she's actually working in international research. She works for the Sloan Kettering Cancer Society, and she spent a lot of time this past couple of years in Nigeria doing additional research and now waiting to decide where she's going to go to medical school. So in Norway, she was doing research on access to education for refugees. So she was really interested in the Norwegian model for how they were taking refugees and actually getting them into formal educational systems, which is often a barrier for people that don't have a lot of their academic records or maybe had their education interrupted. So Michelle Clark, I just love this picture, so I had to include it. It's very colorful. But she was a PhD student and actually ended up doing research in Nepal on this invasive species of vine. I don't recall what it was, but in rural Nepal, it was really threatening the livelihood of a lot of the people in those areas. So she did ecological and community surveys to think about and talk about what are some best mitigation strategies, because you can't burn it, you can't rip it up, and so what are some real ways that we can mitigate this invasive vine species. She finished her PhD in environmental life sciences at ASU, and now she currently works here as a program manager where she works on inclusion programs for STEM programs and things like that. And I just talked to her this week, and she's going on a AAAS research fellowship for the next couple of years. So she's going to Washington to represent ASU and learn about inclusive science policy. So a lot of good things there. My other favorite picture, because this is like as Fulbright as it gets, right? Just people, this is when you say, well, I'm going to Spain, this is what everyone imagines themselves doing. But Jackson Williams got a creative arts grant to go to Spain. He actually enrolled at the Universidad Pablo de Olavide, where my Spanish is not great, where he studied traditional and contemporary Spanish guitar, took some flamenco classes, because of course he did, and just basically spent his time learning from master teachers how to be a better guitarist. He ended up getting a doctoral degree in Doctor of Musical Arts at USC, and now he actually runs a nonprofit that teaches sets up classical guitar instruction in Title I schools in California. So I think perhaps you saw a theme there that each of these applicants is very engaged in community, very service-oriented. So how do they pick them, right? That's always a great question. Am I a good applicant, right? The selection criteria, I put criteria here, but what it actually says on the Fulbright website is selection preferences, because it's very subjective and it varies a little bit from country to country. The number one thing they're looking for is feasibility of the proposal. And there's a lot of things that go into feasibility. Part of it is your design. Part of it is your qualifications. So if you design a project where you're going to go tromping around in rural Nepal, doing interviews with people and you don't speak Nepali, then you'd better figure out how is this going to work exactly. Your academic or professional record, so part of this is your literal transcripts and grades and things like that. There's no minimum grade point average for Fulbright, but your background needs to be strong enough to do what it is you want to do, right? And so if you're proposing a project that requires a lot of quantitative skill, you better have that on your record. If you're enrolling in a graduate degree program, your transcripts better show that you're a very strong candidate. But yeah, there's a wide variety of academic backgrounds that they're considering. Personal qualifications, which is probably the broadest criteria that anyone's ever written. We'll unpack that one in a bit. And language preparation. Obviously, you're going to be traveling abroad. Obviously, most of the countries in the world do not speak English, although many people there would like to learn, which is why we have ETAs. But some countries are going to require foreign language proficiency for you. Some are going to recommend it, and some will not require it at all. And so that's one of the things that you're going to want to pay attention to as you're looking at countries is, do I need to speak the language? Now, the great news is if you do have high foreign language proficiency, that really opens up your odds for countries that do require language, because not everyone has proficiency. Not everyone has proficiency in Portuguese, right? And that can really make you a very strong candidate for certain countries. And again, we'll look at the countries to see, do they have special preferences? Do they want older students, meaning graduate students? Do they want students in particular fields? And then they're looking at your package as a whole as, will this advance the Fulbright mission? So if we think about the examples that we just looked at, sharing knowledge across cultural boundaries, breaking down barriers, promotion of goodwill, and desirability of achieving diversity. Because this is a federal program, they would like to ensure that the cohort of students that we're sending abroad represent what the population in the United States looks like and is like, and the backgrounds they come from, geographically, economically, any way, shape, and form. And so we were just kind of joking that for a lot of the people at the national reading level, they find ASU to be a diverse institution, meaning that if you look at the concentration of universities and colleges in the US, they're all kind of crunched up on the eastern seaboard, and they're like, wow, we got one from Arizona. And I can just see all the images of cacti and things like that in their head, and cowboys and skulls in the desert. And they're like, we should include them. They're going to increase diversity, not having any idea how large and globally connected this university is, which is fine. I'll take that advantage. But it's important as you get into the application to think about, what are the ways in which I do represent the United States, right? What would my host learn from my country about meeting me? And a lot of times people are like, well, I'm just one person. I'm like, exactly, right? Because whatever it is you are, you're probably going to buck some of the stereotypes that your host will have about you. So the personal qualifications, breaking that down a little bit more, what makes for a great Fulbrighter? Excellent communication skills, right? This is a people-focused program. You have to be able to engage with people that aren't like you. You can't be a wallflower. You need to be able to talk to people. Flexibility, adaptability, and openness, that's actually a running joke in Fulbright. So anytime something goes wrong, we just go flexibility, adaptability, whatever. But we're sending you abroad to a foreign country with limited oversight. It's basically, well, here's your plane ticket, good luck. Call the embassy if you need something. They need to know that you're adaptable and you can hang with any situation. One of my favorite postcards I've ever gotten from a Fulbrighter was a student I had that got an ETA to Malaysia. And she related that she basically showed up at the embassy, they handed her over to the handler. They, oh, you're lucky, we just bought a new car. Handed her car keys and some instructions and said, see you. and she had to drive basically across the island, ended up in another village, and it was the middle of the night, got in there, found her roommates, and then was wondering, why is there just a hole in the floor in the bathroom? What's going on here? And I don't have any underwear. Where can I buy underwear? Oh, I have to drive back across the island to another city to buy underwear. And she finished the postcard by saying, every day I cry, and every day is the best day of my life. So, yeah. That encapsulates the whole experience, right? So strong, the alumni are laughing really hard here. Strong record of service, so some record that you are engaged with your community. And this can look like a lot of different things, right? It doesn't all have to be flashy, but some indication that you care about other people and you want to get involved. Extracurricular interests, clear ideas for enrichment activities. So your hobbies, your interests, the things that you do outside of your studies are actually things to hang your application on, right? And these are things that, if you're an avid athlete, I was going to say soccer player, but I don't want to steal Alex's example. But if you're an avid athlete or musician or artist, these are ways in which people get together, right? Whatever you do here, think about how would you do that there, and how would you use it to meet other people. And again, we talked about how you represent this country. The application is pretty straightforward. You're going to look at it a lot over the next few months. But there's no upload of resume or anything like that. You'll actually just fill all of that into the application itself, all of your experiences, education, awards, honors. And then the centerpiece of the application is really the essays, which is where ANSA comes in, right? The centerpiece of the two essays it's called the Statement of Grant Purpose, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It states the purpose of your proposal, whether that is how you propose to teach English or what you propose to do with the study research award. For the study research awards, it's a 2-page essay because you've got more explaining to do. For the ETA, it's 1 page because they want to make your life hard. Once you start writing a 1-page essay, you'll know what I mean. So the personal statement is 1 page, and here you tell your entire life story in 1 page. But here they want to know about those selection preferences. In what ways do you represent diversity? What international experiences or lack of international experiences have you had in your life? What's the bigger picture? What are the important incidents in your life that have led you to this? There is 1,000,001 ways to write this essay, and again, we're here to help with that process as well. And then every application will need 3 references. If you're applying for study research, those will be conventional letters of recommendation, and for the ETA, they have a reference form that you'll get your references to complete. Interesting wrinkle, one of the 3 references cannot be a faculty member. So they want a reference from somebody outside of the classroom that has seen you working, interacting with others. Some applicants need, and again, this is another one of those, well, it depends. If you are applying to a country that requires foreign language proficiency or you are claiming foreign language proficiency, you will get a foreign language evaluation, or an FLE, again, another acronym. We have faculty members all across the campus that are happily meet with you to do this. It's a very simple process. If you're applying for a study research award, you'll need to get a letter of affiliation. This is probably the vaguest part of the whole process, where you'll just simply find someone and write to them and say, will you help me? And they'll say yes or no. It's a little more complicated than that, but you will actually include a letter from a host in your host country who has agreed to be your affiliation. And if you're applying in the arts category, you'll need to provide some evidence that you actually are good at this. And so that would, it changes depending on the specific discipline, but a writing sample, audition tape, something like that. The timeline for Fulbright is quite extended compared to most of the other programs that we do. Here we are, just days away from the start of the next cycle, and we are still waiting on results from previous year. So the cycle actually overlaps itself as we head in. So between now and all the way into August, you'll be working on your application materials, developing the ideas, working on the projects, securing letters of recommendation, securing affiliations, all that kind of stuff. Because the deadline is in September doesn't mean you start working in September, right? We expect people to start working before school's out so we can go into summer with a rough draft. Wrap that application up in late August and September, participate in our campus interviews with our endorsement committee, and then we'll get ready to submit in early October. And then what I tell people is then forget you ever did it. And go on with your life as if nothing ever happened, and maybe you'll wake up on the other side and be offered a Fulbright. Because you'll wait a long time, between October and the end of January, to find out if you've even been passed on to the host country. And then from January until now-ish, late March, early April, to find out if you've been offered an award, right? So fairly long cycle. But the good news is all of this work that you're doing, particularly graduating seniors, is going to lay the groundwork for the next thing that you're doing, right? If you're applying to graduate school, medical school, jobs, whatever, you'll have all of your ducks in a row. You'll have your references in order. You'll be ready to go. So no effort wasted. So again, Fulbright.asu.edu is your best starting point right there on our website. And we've got some getting started videos, and they're little TikTok length videos that kind of explain some of the basics of what we've talked about today. Start looking at award options, start looking at country options. You'll be on the Fulbright site itself. Once you've got a fair idea of which award you'd like to talk about, then you're going to want to book an intake appointment. We do all of our intake appointments via Zoom because it's really allowed us to reach the widest diversity of students at ASU. And we do them as group meetings. And so you'll get to hear about how other people are getting into this and what they're thinking about doing. And we found it to be very instructive as people learn how other people are doing the same process. And also you can share your misery together. And schedule, anxiety, stress, misery's too strong. Schedule a getting started appointment. So once you've explored options, you think you know what country you want to do, you think you know what award you want to do, then we'll meet again. And we'll start looking at the application itself, how to get started, how to do it, how to get started on the essays, and we'll point you in the right direction, and hopefully off you go. We have weekly open writing office hours. It's called The Right Place. It works better when you see it written, because it right with the W, right? The Right Place, get it? Okay, never mind. But The Right Place is weekly open walk-in hours for students to come in and do brainstorming and work with us and things like that. And then when you're ready to actually start looking at drafts, we have drafting appointments as well. And so you can schedule with us to meet with the relevant advisor and get feedback on your application materials. Our timeline, right? So the key dates to keep in mind. It actually opens April 3rd. That's the earliest you can actually access the Fulbright application. But our campus deadline is September 10. You will see a different deadline on the Fulbright site itself. That's the absolute drop-dead deadline, right? We have about a month's worth of work to do, so we have a campus deadline prior to that, and then you'll interview with us on September 22. If this seems a little overwhelming, not to worry. We've broken it down into some more digestible chunks, and so going forward for the rest of the school year, we have Fulbright Fridays, because if you know anything about ANSA, you know we love alliteration. The next one, the first one will be this Friday. It's the ETA for all careers and majors. And so a lot of people assume just because they're not an education major or they don't want to be a teacher when they grow up, that's not for them. We found the opposite to be true, actually, that people that come from varying academic backgrounds are very strong applicants for ETA. What you basically need is enthusiasm and interest in service and an interest in being a great ambassador. So that would be a really great session to learn about how can this work for people from all different types of backgrounds. If you're interested in graduate degree awards, that will be the following week. And then after that, we'll have a conversation about how to get great references for Fulbright, because I think it's good to think about that now since the faculty are here. Once that clicks over, we hit midnight, they all turn into pumpkins, and you're not going to find them all summer long. So good time to have that conversation before the school year ends of like, hey, I'm going to apply for Fulbright later. Here's a bottle of whiskey. Would you like to write my reference? April 19 and 26, it's a big enough topic we broke it into 2 sessions, but really, how do I start even conceiving a study research project? If you're thinking, yeah, I'd really like to do that independent project idea, where do I get started? How do I do this? It seems really big. Not to worry, we've broken it down, and we'll have a 2-part session on that. So if you don't like typing, there's a QR code. I'll put it back up at the end of the session. And I encourage you to attend any and all of those. They'll all get a little deeper into the broader topics that I talked about today. So, all right. I don't see any other phones up. Okay. So I'd like to invite our Fulbright alumni up to the table. I guess we don't have a dais, but. And what I hope you hear today is a wide range of experiences, but also some commonalities of experience. But these are all ASU graduates who won Fulbrights and had different experiences in very different countries. So we'll try to save plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So as you're working through and you hear some interesting tidbits you'd like to know more about, or if you have questions for me about the program, by all means. So we'll begin alphabetically. That's the fairest way I could think to do it. With Esther. By last name. That's how we do it. sorry. You can't pretend like you're in KISS. I'll have to take this back. Sue, Esther.
Test.
Wonderful. Esther did her grant in Ireland, so we'd love to hear more about your experiences, what the project was like, and takeaways from your experiences.
Yes, so I had been looking through all of the countries, and my mother's first language is Spanish, and so I have a rudimentary Spanish background, and I mean Mexican background in the language of Spanish. And so I was looking and looking, and I thought, which of these countries, and I'll really learn Spanish, and I kept going back to Ireland. I'd had one visit to Ireland, and my partner and I are both from the Yaqui people, which are northern Mexico, southern Arizona, and we found a really strong kinship with things, the colonization and some of the older pre-Christian things that were sacred to Irish people. And so I kept thinking, no, Professor Mox said, Ireland and the UK and Canada are really hard. So no, don't look at that. And finally I thought, I'm just going to do it. So I had my first meeting with him, and he said, so which country did you choose? And I said, Ireland. And he said, and so I asked him to, kind of hear me out. And the project that I wanted to do in theater was a theater project looking at the commonalities between Native Irish and Native Americans. And it was pretty amazing. When I got to Ireland, everyone had a story about how we were connected or how we were similar. Back in about 170 years ago, the Choctaw people sent money after they'd walked the Trail of Tears to help the Irish survive the Great Hunger there. And so the Irish people raised millions of dollars to help two Arizona tribes survive the pandemic. So all of that was kind of wrapped into this idea. One of the things I would recommend if you are going into a study research and you have to get your host country to send you that letter of affiliation is to come up with your idea first, like why that country, not just because you think it's really cool and you love it and you want to go there and you're tired of the heat and the cactus and you want to go to Ireland. Look at what is a meaningful reason for you to engage with that country? What would you bring to them? How would you serve that country? And when you have that, then reach out to people and really look at who you're reaching out to. Why them? Why is that particular person a good affiliation, or those people? I did reach out to a person, Dr. Miriam Houghton at the University of Galway, and she did amazing work with women's bodies on stage and how a lot of times they are put in situations of being harmed in the theatrical way. And I found her fascinating. So I reached out to her and I put Fulbright in the subject line. And then in it, I gave her kind of an abstract of what I wanted to do. And I heard back from her right away asking for a meeting. So I was super lucky, but I had kind of prepared ahead of time. So I would recommend that when you look at the dates that Professor Mox put up, like give yourself an earlier date and start working on all of these things, because your letter of affiliation will inform your study research, your proposal. And it did mine. Okay, so I didn't get the Fulbright on the first try. Second try, I did all of the things I'm telling you to do now. So start early, use that letter of affiliation. I literally used some of her wording to talk about what I was going to do with the University of Galway. The letters of reference also, before you reach out to the people who are going to write your letters, have that kind of, it doesn't even have to be big, just the size of an abstract. Send it to them and say, this is what I want to do. I was super lucky in the theater department here at ASU. The folks who were writing my letters said, send us your send us your essays. And they did, and they gave me all sorts of feedback, and the folks at ANSA gave me wonderful feedback, and I was able to write for the second time, and that's when I got my Fulbright. Also, double check all the details. There's mistakes I made the first time. I'm not saying that's why I didn't get it. I'm just saying it might be. For example, they had a 10-page minimum on, I'm a playwright, so they had a 10-page minimum, maximum, 10-page maximum of what you could submit. They asked for your best work. So I submitted a play that won the Kennedy Center Award. It was 90 pages, and I didn't realize, and the second time I'm like, oh, I read it more clearly. It's a big application. It seems like here's these components, but there are a lot of pieces, parts, and little details.
Hear the way.
Oh, no, just comb through it. And if it says 10 pages, don't go over that. So is there something else I should?
No, we'll have some further questions, I'm
Okay.
sure. But, yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you. And Yoko.
So as you can see, I just added photos in mine. My name is Yoko. Oh, can you hear me? So I was placed in San Juan, Argentina. I'll just kind of give you a synopsis of my photos, and talk about the process. Very minimal. So down here on the right, we were invited to Mark Stanley's house, so the ambassador of the United States. This is my entire cohort, including the research. We were all dispersed through Argentina. I was placed in San Juan. There was another Fulbrighter with me, so I wasn't by myself. Trying to summarize, down on the left-hand side is the Fulbright president of Argentina. So that was a mid-year seminar. My picture in the middle in Buenos Aires. And just like, and then my little picture in the middle with the obelisco, that's when I first arrived. Argentina did become champions. That was one of my sub-reasons I chose Argentina, because I'm a big fan of soccer. And up on the right are in my cohort. Once you arrive and get to know everyone, we're all dispersed from the entire country. These are probably the girls I became good friends with. Doesn't work. We ended up traveling a lot together. So that's a winery we attended. And just like Kyle was mentioning, do the hobbies you love. So soccer is really big in Argentina and all over the world. So I continued playing soccer and those are probably one of my great friends in San Juan. Did travel to, as you can see, Evito Pereno Glacier down to the Salt Flats. And in San Juan, that's it's called El Hongo. It's kind of like I guess you can say like the Grand Canyon of Arizona. So I definitely went there to a national park. And right in the center is Capital de San Juan, and I was placed with two other, I guess you can say ETAs, but they were from the UK, and my best friends that I met in San Juan. And a tiny picture, there's like a little picture of cash. So important to know when you go to your country, how your country functions economically. I don't know if you are aware of the situation in Argentina. The inflation is pretty high, so cash is pretty much the way to go in order to get good rates. You can use your card, but again, cash is the way to go. And just to summarize, I chose my country. I spent some time in Spain. Being Mexican, I wanted to go somewhere in South America where they speak Spanish, chose Argentina. I'm glad I chose it. Learned a lot about it culturally. Yes, siesta does exist, and especially in San Juan, they do close for 4 hours. It was an adjustment period, but I do miss siesta, being back in the States. And I think overall, what the experience is what you make it. So what you put into it is what you're gonna get out. Just like they mentioned, your advisors, it's important to get out of that comfort zone. We all, are used to our own community, our own society, but just being able to be yourself, that's something you shouldn't change when you arrive. The way you speak English, the jargon you use. Yeah, just be yourself and always remember what you put into anything is what you're gonna get out. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything. The quote your students said about crying every day, but it's the best day of your life is true. You do have highs and you do have lows, but you know, you just wake up, the day ends, and it's a new one tomorrow. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Alec, you are next. Go ahead and take this one because I think it's a little more stable.
Yeah, sounds good. Hey, I'm Alec, and I did an ETA in Spain. I guess my slide's kind of similar to yours in a way. But and are we answering just like why we chose the country or like everything? Okay. 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 Yeah, so I chose Spain because I had previously studied abroad in Spain for a few months when I was an undergrad, and I was looking to, well, I kind of knew like going into my senior year that I really wanted to apply to Fulbright because I was kind of the kid who walked into the honors hall and saw all the pictures, and I was like, I want to be on the wall eventually, have my picture on there. And it just kind of, so I kind of knew that I wanted to apply, and I had talked to some previous grantees, and I was trying to decide where I wanted to go. And ultimately, I knew I wanted to continue learning Spanish because that was one of my passions. And I knew that when I was in Spain the first time, I didn't get the full cultural immersion that I had desired because in my study abroad group, I was often surrounded by a bunch of Americans doing like different activities with that group. And so to be able to apply and return and go to a different part of the country and be in a really small rural town was a big reason like why I wanted to go back. And so I guess just some photos of what I'm doing here. So the top right, or the top left is a picture of one of the classes of students that I had with the fourth graders. I'm also a huge soccer fan, so that was a big part of my Fulbright experience. I got the opportunity to see Barcelona win La Liga that year. That was the year they clinched the league, and so we got to see Messi play and Suarez and everything. It was very cool. I got to go to a mid-year conference. This is the other grantees in the community that I was in. I got to do some traveling. And I also played a lot of soccer in the town that I was in. So I was fortunate because I was in this really small town of about 25,000 people in a very rural region of Spain. And so I played on 2 different soccer teams. One was the group that's over in the bottom left. We were out celebrating at dinner. But it was just a rec team that I played with. And I also played with a futsal team that was part of the Spanish football system that was part of the 3rd division. It was like the local town in my team. So I was very fortunate to be able to be integrated in such a really good group of people and develop these really long-lasting friendships with them. So that's in summary. Yeah, I can answer more questions later if you want.
Okay. Oh, I don't want to look at my pictures because I had a really hard time filtering through my pictures, and I told them that's why my slide was late because I have hundreds. So I did a lot of deleting and being like, oh, I loved this kid. Oh, I loved this teacher. So I was like, they need to be on the slide. So this really could have been a 10-slide post, but unfortunately, this is what we get. My Fulbright experience is super wild in the sense that when the country I ended up in is not the country I applied for. Not really heard of in the Fulbright sphere. Maybe Dr. Mox has, but yeah.
Twice.
Really? Okay.
Twice.
So when I applied to Rwanda, and that was because here at ASU I had done an internship with Solarspell. If you know it, if you don't know it, look it up. I love them. But I was a metadata intern with them, and because I went to school here, my undergrad is in secondary education, so I really do have that teaching background. Does not mean you need the teaching background to be an ETA at all. But that's where, when you're tailoring your application, what am I, like who am I, where do I fit? Solarspell was helped me tailor that, especially with my education background. There's a war going on in Ethiopia, so there's refugees filtering into Rwanda. We were finding basically resources at the time, COVID resources, education resources that could be used by Peace Corps volunteers or members of the community in Rwanda to help manage the refugees filtering in from Ethiopia. So when I applied for Fulbright, I was like, this is what I know. So I was actually a semi-finalist for Rwanda. And when people look at Fulbright, they think of like, oh, this big thing, and it's an amazing opportunity, it's an amazing scholarship, but it is for everyone. So when I got the semi-finalist notification, I was like, oh, cool, I made it, and I didn't make it, but I was like, I made it, like, I didn't think I would get that far. That would have been like February, January. April, but right before graduation, they were like, alternate, which is not necessarily, there's non-select, there's alternate, and then there's finalist. Finalist is like, you've got it. Alternate is, there was a lot of competition for this, but we only have this many openings, and then non-select is just non-select. So I was an alternate, and I did the whole graduation from Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, was busy celebrating, and the email actually came through Friday night, and I was celebrating with my family my graduation Saturday. I think we did it Friday or Saturday. Sunday morning at like 4 or 5 a.m. I had this sudden urge to check my email, and I had a finalist notification from Ghana, and I said, "What is happening? What is happening?" And I stopped breathing when I got the semi-finalist notification, but the finalist notification was wild to me because, one, it's like 5 a.m., and I was like, that's not real. Am I dreaming? Because it really was dark. And I called my mom, and I was like, what do I do? And she says, well, it sounds like you want it. And I said, okay, I'm going to Ghana. And I guess that goes into the flexibility and adaptability of being a Fulbrighter. Because really, I didn't know anything about Ghana, but if we really think about it, I didn't know anything about Rwanda either. So, and I even went to do my visa, and Abdu, who I love, my passport/visa guy, that my grandma also knows, he said, oh, you would have liked Rwanda better, because he wants to retire there. But I have to disagree. Ghana was amazing. I loved my students and the teachers, and the Ghanaians are so friendly, and I'm not saying Rwandans aren't, but I got there, and you're definitely going to go through culture shock, and you have the highs and lows that we've talked about. But if you can see from my pictures that I refuse to look at because I'll talk about everyone in them, it was the most transformative experience of my life, in the sense of what you learn, what you see, and how that shapes you as a person. You are the same person when you come back. You are not the same person when you come back. You are both of those things. Yeah, and going in, I'll tell you a little about Ghana now that I was talking about my journey in Fulbright. I was also one of the first 2 ETAs ever selected in Ghana. So it was kind of like a, here you go. Like, they didn't have experience working with ETAs. It was a very new program for the embassy to take on because they didn't have a Fulbright commission. And they did place us in the northern region, which is very far from the embassy. We were an hour flight. So but I did have a roommate. Well, that was great, is the 2 ETAs that they did select. They put us together. And that was wonderful. But what we did was a lot of asking questions, and that's what's really great, is being flexible and adaptable and personable is what makes your Fulbright a valuable experience. It's like walking down the street and having to ask someone where I pay my electricity bill was how I got to know what this person did for a living and what this building, how it functions on my street and how great that person is, and then just meeting more people and meeting more people and meeting more people. And if you can't tell, I love pictures, but Ghanaians love pictures. They love pictures. And it was not hard to get pictures with them. I did not have to beg. But I love pictures too because I got to bring my Fulbright experience back with me. And I'm sorry if I sound cracky. I've been losing my voice for like a week, and it's just now coming back. But yeah, I lived in the Dagbon Kingdom in Tamale, Ghana, which is like a metropolitan. So it was still a little bit of a city, but you could travel 10 minutes, and it was farmland. Yeah, so the community I lived in was predominantly Islamic. There's like a split between Christianity and Islam in Ghana, where in Senegal you'll see mostly Islam, 99% of the population is Islam. In Ghana it was predominantly Christian, but there was so much Islam that you couldn't tell. Where in the US, you'll see you have more experience with Christianity. And you can read that in a book, but to get there and to see it was really amazing. Because you can read about, like, oh, the population density of this religion in this area, but to go into my school and see the teachers praying in between, like before or after lunch, was a really cool experience. And then I realized when I got there that it wasn't that I had good or bad ideology associated with what Islam is or who Muslims are. It was that I had no knowledge. So that's really great about Fulbright, is that you get to, you're a sponge. And when you go in with that idea of like, oh, I'm gonna fix this, or I'm gonna be this kind of teacher, that is not, like, it's amazing you're there, and it's amazing what the work you're doing, but you go in as a sponge. And that's when we talk about mutual understanding, which is the goal of Fulbright. I arrived and I was really, things you're frustrated by, you realize, oh, it's just my Americanness because people are running late for meetings. And I wasn't really frustrated about that, but you're like, you have a lot of what's going on. That was a weird question. I saw something strange today, and it's not necessarily that. You're just going through culture shock, and once you realize that those are completely normal things, Fulbright becomes really cool. And you're like, the way I think about things isn't necessarily wrong or right, but the way I think about things is different. And there's different ways of thinking about things. Yeah, so I worked in the Dagbon Kingdom. My students were Dagombas, but they came from all over the country. Some of them spoke 7 languages. When I arrived, they were actually in the middle of a teacher strike, so I was super frustrated by that. But then I went with my fellow ETA to her school, and we just kind of walked around and played games with the students because they still had to be on campus. They were boarders. So the teachers weren't there, but students were in the classrooms with no supervision. So we were like, hey, we're going to ask you questions about who you are. And they loved that. I'm probably going over my time, and I'm so sorry. But I will wrap up. But once I got into the classroom, and just the coolest things happened. That was what it was. Is I asked a student one time, oh, what kind of music do you listen to, or what do you watch on television? And someone said, and I'm Mexican American, but I did not expect an answer to be Telemundo. And I just dropped. I was like, did you just say Telemundo? And he kind of got scared because of my reaction. He was like, oh. And I said, okay. And I even learned more about that answer during my 10 months in Ghana. I was stuck there for an extra couple weeks on accident. But just how strong, like, Telemundo is, the love for Hispanic culture in Ghana was really cool. So I got to bridge that gap. But my students, the great thing about being an ETA is that they, adults will answer your questions. They have a lot of information, but students will tell you everything unfiltered. So if you want to learn about your country, you ask the students. And they did, and they were super amazing. The beautiful things about Ghanaian culture that I grew to love, they grew to love that I loved them. I ate the food, and they were like, wow, you're eating our food. And Dr. Mox talked about the stereotypes you get to break down. One of the teachers on multiple occasions mentioned to me, we thought you wouldn't talk to us. We thought you'd be closed off. And I said, all I do is talk. What do you mean? I love to talk. I love to socialize. Sometimes I was at my school till 10 o'clock at night. You do not have to do that. But I was, because I was socializing with my club, my debate club members, and with my teachers. And then I wore the cloth. So it was the food, it was the socializing, and then it was the cloth. I wore the African cloth, and they loved that. They were like, you're wearing our cloth. I was like, yeah, isn't it beautiful? You're wearing our cloth. And I think that's just another part of the Fulbright, is leaning into the culture. Because your job is an ETA, but it's not your job. Your job is mutual understanding, cultural exchange. And that is one of the other reasons why it was so transformative. And then, yeah, just some of the other challenges I faced was coming in and the strikes, and then like feeling underutilized, but you are just an assistant teacher. I made my way with the debate program. We did a lot of stuff, and it was amazing. My students were the greatest thing, the gift I ever had. And then I'll just wrap up on my final week. A thing in Canadian culture that they like to do is, or even like to do is when they're retiring from school, they actually do that, like address the staff, especially if you're like a principal or a headmaster. And when I was leaving, I was like, I would really like to address everyone who's so amazing to me. And my headmaster was like, oh, sure, Monday's your day. And I said, okay. And I walked in and I got to address the staff, and they just let everyone know that I was my final goodbye. And I made sure to thank my HOD, I think he's up here, Mr. Polonius. He was super open to me, and whenever I disagreed with people, he was, he like understood me as a foreigner, and he understood them as Ghanaians, and he'd be like, oh, and he would make some type of peaceful thing. Not that we were fighting, but I'd be like, hey, why don't we do it like this? And they'd be like, no. And he was always just super protective of me as one of his staff, and I thanked him for just being a super amazing person, as well as an amazing head of department. And he got a round of applause from that, and I was so grateful for that for him. But then I thanked them for, one, welcoming me, teaching me, feeding me, doing all the things that they did for me. And I said that I would be back. And I have returned to Ghana, not to the school yet, but I'm planning. And there was just so much appreciation for that. They were like, thank you so much for, one, coming here, but also for wanting to return. And I told them Ghana is my second home. So I guess wild Fulbright experience wraparound. I'm sorry for over-speaking, but not applying to Ghana, and then just, it's been an amazing ride, and now I'm here and I get to share it with all of you. And they loved that too. They're like, you're gonna talk about us. That's insane. But yeah, thank you for hearing me out. So I got to share about the people who are so amazing to me. Yeah.
Thank you. Just for the record, that's not typical that you get offered a different country. Okay. So don't plan on that.
Okay. I was so confused.
Yeah, it's happened twice in my career. But
What was the other one?
Laos, he had applied to Vietnam.
Okay.
He got straight up declined, and then got just this straight up letter says, "Congratulations, you've been awarded to Laos." I'm like, it's like, is this an accident? I'm like, I don't think so. Are you gonna go? Yeah. And he went, and he stayed 2 years. They offered him a second year, and he had such a wonderful experience. He stayed a second year, and
The second year?
I don't think so. I don't know
Okay.
this one. Yeah. And finally, wrap us out, going from A to Z, Celeste is going to talk about her experiences in Brazil.
Hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Celeste. I wish I could have fit in a couple more photos. But yeah, this is just some of my photos with my students. That photo up there with the Brazil flag was my going away party at the university. And this picture of me with a really big tree is at a popular park where I did my Fulbright, which was in Rio Branco in Acre, which is very west of Brazil. It's a pretty isolated space. We were really close to the Amazon, so my placement was one of the closest placements to the Amazon rainforest. We weren't in it, though, very close. And the park is called Horto Florestal, and it's like a really popular place to go and have a walk, to exercise. They have a lot of free events for like dancing and like art, and so it's a big hub in Rio Branco. And I also got to go to Rio de Janeiro. It was really cloudy that day. And my photo in front of Christ the Redeemer, I was like this tiny. So this one, I'm in the photo and you can see the statue, which was really cool, being able to see like such a well-known monument in person. And then that photo with the 4 people waving goodbye, that was my last day in Brazil when I was leaving. And I just got back December 12th. So I've been in the US for like 4 months almost now. And they were the faculty at my university. My host professor my host professor's best friend, his husband, and then my host professor's other very close friend. So I grew very close not only to the students, but to the faculty, which is really nice because when you also get close to the faculty, you can create like professional relationships, and then you come back if you like want to apply to anything. And I applied to law school while I was in Brazil, and I had a couple more applications in January. But my host professor was like more than happy to be like, "Oh, of course, like I'd love to write this letter for you." And so so I kind of skipped why I even chose Brazil. And as everybody shared, it's so different for everybody. And for me, I knew I wanted to do Brazil. Starting my sophomore year, I took a class, a justice studies class, and my professor really loved education, so we had a strong education focus in our class. And so we read a popular educational theory book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, and he's a very popular Brazilian author and education reformist. And so in his book, he talked a lot about the way to make the world like a better place is like through education is to create strong communities and to to make sure that rural communities also get good education, good educators. And so he was really focused on, just being there for people. And I really resonated with that. I have, 4 younger sisters. I'm first-gen college student. And so, I, would like to craft a better world for everybody, and including myself, my sisters. And so I use in my personal statement, a lot of my personal stories to connect with what Paulo Freire, said. And so, that was kind of I know I want to be in Brazil. I want to experience this educator position and to see what it's like to develop a strong sense of community and, figure out how I can provide education in this rural area, via the, sharing, cultural knowledge, and just experience that first person in Brazil where this author is from. And so I chose Rio Branco upon reading that it was very rural. And is pretty rural, and I have a couple of stories, and that are also highs and lows of the experience. I got really involved with visiting a lot of middle schools and high schools, in my spare time. And there was a middle school that I visited, and there were a military school, which I'd never even heard or been to a military school in the U.S. So that was a really interesting experience. But I'm there. I'm talking about Arizona in the Southwest, and I finished saying something. I said, "Does anybody have any questions?" And one student was like, "Can I get your autograph?" And I was like, ask again at the end of class, because I was really funny, and I didn't want to be yeah, let me go over in the middle of this presentation. And then we get to the end of the presentation, and I'm like, okay, so anything? And then a different student goes, "So what about your autograph?" And I was like, I laughed, and I looked at the professor, and the professor was like, "Could you do it for them, please?" And I was like, okay. And so it wasn't the whole class. There was about 15 students, and so I'm signing their notebooks, and they're all so different. Some of them have different little drawings, or Spider-Man, and they're 11, and so when you meet somebody different at that age, it's so cool. And as I'm signing their books, they're holding my hand or just saying "Can I give you a hug?" or "Oh my God, you're so beautiful." And I have younger sisters, so I'm "Oh my God, I'm gonna cry." And so it was sounds kind of crazy, but it was a moment where you realize just by being yourself, some of the other panelists have said, by being yourself, talking about what you think the students might be interested in, they will be really grateful for it. And maybe it's not every single person that's "Oh, you changed my life," but there will be people who are this has been some of the greatest, or this has been the nicest experience that I will have with a foreigner, or maybe the only experience. And I think the students were so expressive with how thankful they were, because it's not very common for people to go to that part of Brazil. I mean, I feel one of the biggest questions I got asked there was "Why are you here?" When I would share why. And then the other story, so when I got in, and it's we were in São Paulo for our orientation, and from São Paulo to Rio Branco, it's a day and a half of travel. So it's pretty far. I had to go on 4 different planes, and I got on really late because there's not a lot of planes that get into Rio Branco. And when I arrived, I actually had gotten there just a couple days after, Rio Branco had received the same amount of rain that they do over a few months in a few days. So the airport was flooded, and it was a small airport. So I get off the plane, and my professor's like, hey, Celeste, you have to sleep in the airport. And I was like, okay. Not expecting that. I had an apartment set up, so I was looking forward to going home and sleeping. And I just, I called my grandma, and she was like, okay, like, just keep an eye out, you'll be fine, try and get some sleep, we'll talk tomorrow. And I was like, I'm alone, Grandma, like, be sad for me. But then that kind of snapped me into thinking about that reason why that I mentioned of, I'm there to develop a sense of community with the people here, and I want to, if I want to, share my knowledge with them, then I think part of the knowledge you gain from being in your host country is experiences like that. And while that was difficult, after the few days had passed, when I would meet people and I would tell them I went through that, they'd be like, oh, like in Portuguese, people from Acre call themselves Acreanos. They would tell me, you're a real Acreana now. Like, this is, flooding is something that impacts all of us. And so it'd just be like, props to you for going through that and, not being scared away out of like our rural town. So yeah, there's, a lot to take away, good experiences, and, maybe you'll have a scary experience that becomes something really positive or something that you're really proud of. And you'll have moments of like, very like genuine human connection, like when a student asks you to sign an autograph, and you might think like, oh, I'm like just a girl, but it's really nice, and you get to do things like cultural immersion experiences, and you're just seeing a whole new part of the world, and there's so much to take away from it. So yeah.
Well, thank you. I get to talk to them all the time if I want to. So I won't put any questions, but I'd love to know if anyone in the audience has questions either for our panelists, preferably, or for me. Anything goes. Yep.
References, you said one cannot be an academic reference.
For the ETA references, the preference is that one not be an academic reference.
Are you aware of the requirements for the binational business?
It's pretty much the same as all the others, but they'd like you're going to need Spanish near fluency, professional.
Well, yeah, and I've actually a Thunderbird, so I actually tested through the requirement to take Spanish there, and I have advanced certification.
Wonderful. Likely, yeah. More than likely, yeah. But check for those kinds of granular questions. The best thing to do is look at the actual country page on the Fulbright site, and they'll spell everything out in very clear detail. It's like the rule book for it. But yeah, and then in that particular case, a good question for the folks at home was asking about foreign language proficiency in countries. The way to prove it is actually a little alarmingly simple from my perspective. You just go and meet with a professor for 20 or 30 minutes, and they fill out a form. It's not a grand test or anything like that. I guess Fulbright figures if you bluff your way through that, it's on you. You're going to spend, the next year in a country where you don't really speak the language. So, I guess they look at it from a karmic perspective. So, other questions? In the back. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Great question for our panelists.
May I?
Yep. So the question for the folks at home is, if you're an ETA, are you given a standard curriculum, or is this something you have to figure out on your own?
Okay, so you are going in as an English teaching assistant. So I was actually placed with a teacher, and then I actually branched out and was like, I'm going to work with a bunch of teachers because my position was super flexible. They didn't really, the person I was even my mentor I was placed with wasn't really supposed to be my mentor originally. So I was like, I'm gonna meet everybody. But in Ghana, you have to think of the country you're going to. Now, Ghana was colonized last by Great Britain, so they use the British English system. So I spelled things wrong there. But so in Ghana, their English classes are designed to, they're working towards the West African examination certificate for SHS, which I was in high school, so it's called WASI. Now, IIE administers like a a TEFL course for you if you don't have English teaching experience, just to help you get like a grasp on lesson planning and like English grammar for non-English like first language speakers. In Ghana, they pretty much speak English as it may not be their first language, but it well near is. Because they speak it, that's the language in school, because in Ghana there were hundreds of languages, so English is the school language that they were using. So my students spoke English. There were different variations of how well that English was spoken, but I would not, as being trained and growing up in the United States and growing up in the US education system, that is not what you should expect when you get there, or anything close to it, depending on where you're going. But also, as much as you can prepare, the bulk of your preparation will happen in country when you're absorbing what their education system is like. I learned a lot about the Ghanaian education system week one with the strikes, which are very common. But also knowing that as much as you want to bring in, like I was trained by Mary Lou Fulton Teachers College, and it's not that my training is bad or that it was incorrect. Those teachers also have training. You are not, and they know more. I was a new teacher, and I was a new teacher in a country that I didn't grow up in. So those teachers were experts to me, and that's who you go to, is who you're working with. They've been teaching it for 3, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. They can explain how they grade their essays, the lessons, how they're built, and you can add your flair or your style or your education to that. But you also have to be mindful that they are testing to also graduate high school. That is very important. So they're trying to pass their WASI. And the students in Ghana, they said, we're WASI minded, which meant like, no, I'm not gonna join your debate club, but good luck with that. They were just trying to graduate. Yeah. But just the long answer to your question is, they will have a preparation course. I would actually recommend reaching out to people who are available on the Fulbright site who've taught in that country to get more information, doing a little bit of research on how that works, specific to that country and how their English teaching is. Some countries, like in Rwanda, they're transitioning from French to English dominant. So a lot of their students speak French and also speak English, but your education is more to like help with that transition. Where in Ghana, it's just because like that's part of their education.
So I'm curious, how does that compare with everyone else's experience?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like Yoko.
Hi. So I was in Doctora Carmen Peñalosa at a university teaching. I received my master's at the Mary Lou Fulton, and I was seeing under 5 professors. One of them was my actual pedagogical professor I reported to on campus. And again, you're not there to change anything. You're not there to correct them. You're just there to assist. And that was just what I was there to assist in what they needed me to do. Some of the classes, language like 1, 2, and 3, they had books that they were reading. So like for us, it would be like level 4, 4th grade, 6th grade, 8th grade. And then sometimes, yeah, you're just hosting discussions. A lot of them, I attended a phonetics class as well as Izzy. She was from the UK. And they pretty much used us on how to pronounce words, which thinking about it, they do use the British English. And again, it's not that I'm wrong, it's just different. So for example, I would say water and she would say water. So it's just like the pronunciation. And yeah, you were just there to their ability, whatever they used you for. And I know for me, sometimes the books I've already read, so it was just good background knowledge as well. Like one word they didn't know was cul-de-sac, so like explaining what a cul-de-sac was, because they don't have those there, or they may have one, but just kind of translating and again, just culturally aware of that. But they end up, your pedagogical professors reach out to you, so they kind of tell you what's expected, what kind of classes you might be involved, and yeah, just ask questions and try to get involved in the classes you're able to get involved in. Again, I was at a university where the students were teaching or getting their degree to become English teachers, and again, that just fit well with me because I received my master's in education. So yeah, everyone's different.
Yeah. One of the things I forgot to mention as benefit is that all ETAs are provided 100% of TESOL training by Department of State. So you're not going into this with no training whatsoever, but as you can hear, what happens on the ground varies quite differently. So Alec, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I taught ages 3 years old to 12 years old, so it's a really wide age group. And for some of the grades, like for 3 to 5, I didn't have any curriculum. For the primary grades, so from 1st grade to 6th grade, I did have a curriculum. And so it was similar to yours, where it was the English, or like the English, the UK English versus the American English, so that was a difference too. But I say it just, like I was in 30 different classrooms every week, so it was like 2 classrooms for each age group, and I was constantly being switched around. And so, yeah, it was just, it was a pretty different experience. And I was at a Catholic school too, so it was a very different experience in that aspect as well, because on the very first day I was doing the introduction slide, and I put up a picture of Sparky, our mascot, to say like what school I came from, and the little first graders are like, why is there a devil there? And so it's just kind of, I think everybody's experience is gonna be, I had to explain that, and my teacher helped me explain that to them too, so we figured it out. But it's just everybody's experience is gonna be a little bit different. The other Fulbright grantee who was at my school, she taught the older students, and she didn't have any curriculum at all, so I think it just depends.
Yeah. It depends. Other questions? Yes.
I have a question specific to research award. So I hear that Canada is one of the harder countries to get in. I was looking at Canada's number of Fulbright research awards. There are 9 awards for research, 9 awards for graduate studies in Canada. That's compared to, say, Germany, is 70. I was just wondering what your advice, what's your experience in Canada? Yeah. And also, like, what is your advice for people who are interested in countries that have a smaller number of awards?
So the statistics for each country are available on the website. If you scroll all the way down, and can I get? I'm stuck. If you scroll all the way down, there's a statistics link in the bottom, and I don't necessarily advise people start there if you don't know what country to pick. Like I'll pick the Indonesia. There we go. But what I say is before you fall in love, you better look at those statistics, right? Because a lot of times people come in like, I'm going to Ireland, and that's what I'm like. I've heard this several times this week. But then look at the number of grants, because obviously English-speaking countries are going to be very popular, because Americans really don't speak any other languages for the most part. Some countries invest much more money in the program than others, but so we want to look at number of awards versus number of grants available. In those very competitive countries, your justification needs to be incredibly strong, right? And the question you're going to get asked over and over and over from me, from anyone else at ANSA, from our faculty committee is, why does it have to be this country? Right, and so that has to be the best possible next step for you. In other countries that are less competitive, you can maybe get away with a little more, I want to expand my comfort zone and get outside, kind of like arguments that would apply to multiple countries, but if something like Canada, like it has to be a unique opportunity. So we have a semifinalist in Canada this year. This is his 3rd time applying, but he does artistic installations, acoustic art. It's really hard to explain. And but there is an artist there in Montreal that he wants to work with, and they have a very strong connection and a very strong affiliation. And sometimes it's a matter of, well, did they like it this year? Because I don't think he's doing anything wrong. It's just very competitive, right? And there are people on the other side of that who are fickle, unfortunately. So. But yeah, if we're going to pick a competitive country, better have a very strong justification for it. It's the best answer I can give. Yep. Other questions? Yeah.
So I was considering the idea of doing like research in Switzerland on direct democracy in Switzerland. So first of all, in terms of a research project, I would get a professor here to sort of work under, or get a professor there. And I don't know, would you consider Switzerland also a hard country again?
I think Katie can look it up, but the number of awards in Switzerland I think is pretty low. And then got one of three languages you might need, depending on where you are in the country. But this, for the folks at home, the simple version of the question is, as you're conceiving a research project, do I need to have a supervisor here in the States and also one abroad? We'll get Esther's perspective, but the simple answer is you don't need anything from anyone here, right? You will need somebody there who's going to host you, and what that means, you'll notice on the Fulbright site, they never say host. I study hospitality as a theoretical concept. I can tell you there's a lot of obligation that goes into being a host. They're not assuming that kind of obligation, right? They're just going to be your affiliate. So whatever you come to an agreement on is what is in that letter. So that could mean I will get you an email address, or it can mean I'll be your mentor. I'll see you every day. I had a friend who got a Fulbright to Turkey, and he saw his affiliation at the airport and then at the airport, and that was it. So it varies quite a bit. Depending on where you are in your education, graduate students, the assumption is that you are doing research towards your graduate degree. If you're applying as a graduating senior, this could be completely independent and could be the basis of your future work. So not necessarily a mentor here, but Esther, what was the nature of the relationship with your mentors and professors here while you were doing this?
It definitely was in the country. So I had supporters and cheerleaders from the theater department here, and getting the essays done, they really, the ONSA team and the theater department, but it was really there, the professor that I worked with. And she ended up also affiliating me with not just the theater department, but the Irish Studies department. And they set up courses for me to audit. So I was able to audit in both departments, which was super informative. And they really thought about my project and how they could support that project, not monetarily, not being with me every day, but just here are the things that you can take advantage of. Here's what we're going to provide for you. For example, the theater space for my final project, which was in the Galway Theater Festival, and they've invited me back, and we'll be there. I'm leaving next month to do that. So that kind of support where they could see where, what I needed and what they had to support that. So if you find the person that really needs you or that really sparks with you, they're going to figure it out with you what you'll need, and that letter will be solid gold. Does that answer, or do you?
I have a follow-on. I just want to, so essentially you could come up with your own research.
Yes.
idea,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't really have to be connected with like a graduate program.
No.
But does the person that you're reaching out to in Switzerland, in my case,
Mhm.
would they have to believe in, they would essentially want to know the outcome of that research, or they could just more just
I think they just need to be interested in it. I mean, if you set that up, that by the end of this is my deliverable, or, they are helping you come up with a deliverable, then that's different. But yes, I was, by the time I went on my grant, I was already graduated. So mine wasn't connected to any specific research I was doing for a degree. It was on its own. And yes, you can come up with any interesting topic that you want and research idea, and all they have to do is go, oh, that's really cool, come do it here in this region. And my two affiliates, the two professors, didn't double check what I was doing. I mean, they definitely supported it and showed up at the performance and designed a panel to speak to the audience about the subjects of industrial schools, it ended up being. And so that they were supportive that way, but they weren't like, give me this thing. That doesn't mean that you wouldn't connect with someone who would, but no, come up with something that excites you.
Very good answer, and it reminds me of a common question I get is, what's the deliverable? What's the outcome I have to have for a Fulbright project? And the answer is there isn't one. It's kind of hard, like you would expect with all this, benefit that you're getting, there would have to be something at the end of it. I think good proposals do have a deliverable often, but you can just be doing baseline research for your future studies, or you could just be doing exploratory research. You could decide to host a conference at the end. You could decide to have a performance of a play at the end. But it's not a specific or requisite part of the application that you have, like I will produce this at the end. But we're at the end of the scheduled time for the presentation, but I'd certainly be, and we have the room until 6 for further discussion. So if anyone has additional questions, I'm happy to answer. I'm sure our panel would be happy to answer as well. So, but if you're trying not to be rude and need to leave, that's fine too. So, any other questions? Well, great. You will have questions. This is known. But you don't know what the questions are yet, so I can't give you the answers. But they will come, and there will be many of them. The one important thing to remember is that you can always reach out to any of the former Fulbrighters. In fact, this is another remarkable thing. If you haven't guessed, I like to brag on ASU, but there are 20 Fulbright alumni ambassadors in the United States right now. 2 of them are sitting here. Talia and Esther are both national Fulbright alumni ambassadors, and so represent us on the national stage. So certainly you can email them. They're on the website. But one of the things we suggest you do is look at our list of previous Fulbright winners and just reach out. And I promise you, in case you can't tell, they don't pick jerks for Fulbright. Right? They generally pick pretty nice, friendly people, and they're always happy to help. Ask questions of everyone. And the funniest thing, it makes me laugh when students say, "I'm sorry to bother you again." I'm like, this is literally our job, is to answer all of your questions. We have infinite endurance for questions, so don't hesitate to ask. So thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. And folks that tuned in from elsewhere, I hope you found this useful. If you're here in person, not to rub it in if you're on live stream, but there's more food. And please help yourself to that. And you're welcome to approach any of our panelists or myself and ask further questions. So thank you all so much.